Well, good morning, friends. Happy Friday to you. Richard Clinton here, and I just felt the need to be able to take some more time and be able to share some thoughts and ideas with you this morning as I'm sitting here, as I'm sitting outside again by my fire pit, and just kind of contemplating. I just thought I'd have a little chat here with all of you. And it's interesting. This week was supposed to be the start of the Anvil Men's Boot Camp. Actually, we were supposed to begin last night. But with everything that's going on with the coronavirus and all that's being thrown our way, we weren't able to continue. We had to cancel our weekend, as I spoke to last week. But we wrestled through that. We've grieved through that, and the team and I kind of talked through that this week as well. And but we know God's doing something good with that. And this morning, this Friday morning, right now, I'll be getting ready to share a teaching on the larger story. And it's kind of wild to kind of think about that as I sit here in front of you and talk about this, that this thought of the larger story is something that God's really been throwing in front of me in the last few days. Actually, as with a book that I'm actually reading through right now called Life with a Capital L by Matt Hurt. Very good read, friends. If you ever are looking for something to dive into, I would definitely recommend this book. I'm not done with it yet. I'm probably 2/3 way through, but it's been definitely a very good read, and I would definitely recommend it. But really looking at the idea of really what it looks like to really embrace our God-given humanity, of who we are as God's image bearers, as humans, as people. And what that looks like, and the pieces that make up our humanity, and what it can look like to really pursue the fullness of life, the abundant life in God through Jesus Christ. And as I really talk through it, really process through this idea of the larger story, we look at everything that's going on. Again, we look at just the situation we're dealing with, and when you look on the surface, friends, it can look so dire. It looks so it can look so bleak. I barely turn the news on now, because one of the things that aggravates me the most is right now, and I'm just going to be 100% honest about that right now, is the twice-a-day updates of the specific number of people that have either been tested positive with this coronavirus or not. We have to get an update twice a day now. We are that enamored and that tuned in and that obsessed with it. And friends, when I was really kind of processing through this yesterday, it really caused some anger to really well up in me. I was really getting frustrated with it. I was talking with my bride Amber about it, and she could sense how frustrated I was getting with it all. But then I was able to, thankfully, step away from that, just pause and spend some time with God and that, and just really surrender that anger to Jesus, and not let that take a hold of me. So back to this whole idea of the larger story and what that really means. I wish I had the quote in front of me, but there's a quote I give when I'm doing my teaching on this session, and it talks about the idea that there's so much in life that we're really certain to misunderstand. Everything that's going on in life, we're always certain to misunderstand it. And when you look at how dire and how bleak this time can look, friends, I want you to just think about just really how much more is going on here. There's always so much more at play. There's always a larger story at play here. And if we find ourselves so enamored and so caught up in our own personal frustration and our own personal small story, whether it's this virus or whether it is whatever's going on in our daily lives, we're missing a lot, and we're missing life. As I read through this book, one of the things that Matt writes is that it's when I lose my life in the bigger story that I find my life. So, friends, it's all about being able to find that place, find where it is that we fit within the grand scheme, within God's larger story, because we all uniquely, as His image bearers, uniquely have a place to fill, right? Those of us in Christ, we all are a unique part of the body of Christ, right? We all have a place to fill in that. So if you lose sight of all that in the midst of everything we see in front of us, in the midst of all the pain and all the struggle and all the difficulty, we're missing a great deal. And we have to be able to look beyond that and know that there's so much more going on than just the here and now and just the things we're dealing with right now. And that Matt also pointed out in this book, he went back to something Walt Whitman had proposed, that the key to life's meaning is discovering your identity in the larger drama. The powerful play goes on, and you may contribute a verse. So I really just pause and think about that for a little bit, friends. Pause and think about what part in this larger story, in this drama, is it that you play? What do you think your part is? Or even how have you lived in the larger story? Or perhaps how have you lived in your own small story? And friends, I'll just confess, my own small story, and you'll hear as I in the podcast that we'll be putting out next week, as I share my own story. For many years, I did live within my own small story. My own small story really revolved around my life, with as a husband and as a father and as a career man. Right? Everything it was revolved around. I didn't look beyond that. There was no real meaning or no purpose to any of that, other than just taking care of what was right here in front of me. And I was really missing a lot, because I didn't have a context to understand my place in God's larger story. And we all have a place to fill in that. We all have a place to fill in that. So what is the verse that you're going to contribute, as Walt Whitman had said? What is the verse you're going to contribute to the larger story? How do you think you fit within the larger story? If you don't think you fit, what can that look like? I love coming out here in the mornings, especially this time of year when, again, everything's coming in bloom and there's all the birds around me, and I just see the sun shining this morning. We've dealt with a lot of rain this year. We've had a lot of rain. So these mornings when we have the sun coming out and just shining of everything, it's beautiful. I don't know where you're at, friends, but here in Georgia, I just love it, being able to have that time out here this morning, this time of year. And it just reminds me again, I spoke about last week about this about the idea of restoration. The spring shows the promise of the coming restoration of all things, and we get a glimpse of that every year. And that takes me back to the larger story, right? That there's always so much more going on, right? And I also spoke to the idea of, or my thoughts on the fruit of everything we see going on right now. Because of the panic, because of the fear that's been drummed up in everything we see. And it's hard for me to comprehend. But all of that, the fruit of all that is evil, right? Which tells me there's also evil at play. It reminds me that evil is at play in the midst of all this. That there's always a constant battle between good and evil in the physical and in the spiritual realms. So I want you to be able to understand that, and God tells us, we are told to guard our hearts. Proverbs 4:23, guard our hearts above all else, because it is the wellspring of life. If we don't guard our hearts, if we allow our hearts to be subjected to all of this that's going on in front of us, to all this pain, all this struggle, all this, I'm losing the words I'm trying to speak right now, but just with everything we have right now, and with all the fear, everything, We're already an anxiety-driven culture, and if we let that fear begin to overtake us, all that anxiety shoots through the roof. That's exactly where the enemy wants us. That's exactly where he wants to take us, because he knows that's where we can be vulnerable. So guard your hearts, friends. Remember where your place is. Remember that you are an image bearer of God. Whether you've surrendered to Christ or not, you still are an image bearer. So there is always hope. Should you choose to trust in Jesus and choose to follow Jesus and choose to surrender your life to him and take your place, your God-given design place in the larger story. There's a place for everyone. So friends, I just urge you today, as I'm sitting there just contemplating that, there's so much more at play here. There's so much more that's going on beyond anything we can see right here in the here and now on our phones or on the news or anything. There's a lot more going on, and I just pray over everyone that in the midst of all this, that we're dealing with right now, that where so many are just held captive in their homes, can't get out because of quarantine orders and all these things that are going on, that there's still hope. And that in the midst of all this, and I was praying through this morning as me and going through with my church family through a 21-day prayer devotion through the YouVersion app. And I would highly recommend that to everyone here. But today was really all about joy, and joy is one of the words that God took me to this year. In the midst of all the things we're dealing with the midst of all the struggle, and again, I'll share that me and my family has gone through a lot over the last year and a half. But he has really taught me that in the midst of all that, I can remain defiantly joyful in him, that I don't have to let all of that overwhelm me. Yes, there are days that are struggles, that are more of a struggle, and I'm thankful for my brothers that I can really reach out to, my good close friends that I can talk to when those days get hard. And I'll urge that as well, friends, that you were made for relationship, you were made for community, and that's a part of the story as well, the relationship and community that we're all meant to live in and walk in. And a part of my small story was also living in isolation. So friends, if you don't have that community, if you don't have those close relationships, I would urge you to pray on that. Pray for God to send you those two close friends. Men, to have one or two close brothers come to you. Ladies, to have one or two close women come really close to you, that could come alongside you, that you can build a trusted relationship with. Because you can't bring everybody into your corners. You can have several friends, and I've gained a lot of friendships over the last few years, but there's still only a few that I truly trust with my story, trust with my life, and trust with what's going on. And that's vital for all of us. And that's a big part of how we were made. Even Jesus modeled that, right? Jesus had this 12, but then he had the 3, Peter, James, and John, that were the closest to him. In the midst of that larger group, you've got to have those few. And that's a part of the relationship that we're made for in this larger story. So friends, I would urge you that if you don't have those relationships, pray for that. Pray for God to send those relationships to you as well, because it will help build you up, build you in such a way to where you can walk stronger within the context of what's going on. You have people to process all this with. You're not sitting in isolation just worried to death about what's going on, because there's nothing to worry about. There's absolutely nothing worried about. Jesus told us. That's why one of the things I come out here and look at these birds, because Jesus reminded us, look at the birds in the air. Doesn't God provide everything that they need? And how much more will he provide? And how much more does he love those who bear his image? That's you and me, right? How much more will he provide for us? He provides everything we need. And he will. Trust in him, look to him, and ask him, and seek him out, and he will provide that. There's so much more going on, friends. Again, it's just a constant reminder of that there's so much more going on. So I want to thank you for taking the time to listen to me this week, and we'll see. I'll be back to you next week and share a little bit more. But I'm thankful just to be able to have some time to be able to share some thoughts and hopefully give you a little encouragement, friends. And I pray that this does give some encouragement to you, that you can really look again to remember that there is always more going on, that you have a place within the context of God's larger story. So seek that out. Spend some time with Him and ask Him where your place is in the larger story. Ask Him where you've lived in your own small story, and maybe how you've lived in the larger story, and what that would look like for you to really step out and step into that. So friends, I pray that you will have a blessed weekend, and we'll be back here next time. Take care and God bless.